I'm here today with Natalie Shirley. She's the president and CEO of the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. How are you doing today, Natalie?
Hey, I'm just great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to have you today. This is a very unique facility here, and I can't wait to kind of learn a little bit more about it and then, dig into this a little bit more. So maybe we could start with you, Natalie. This is a great venue, but how did you get here? How did you get started here?
I'm brought in to fix things, and this was a museum that was struggling. It was struggling financially. It was struggling from a resources standpoint. It was struggling from a deferred maintenance standpoint, et cetera. And that's what I do in Oklahoma City. And so a number of board members approached me after I had finished sort of putting together another enterprise. And I have two rules. One of them is it has to be fixable. And there are certain things in this world that just aren't fixable. But it also has to be something I don't know anything about. I know debits, credits, and people. And if you know debits, credits, and people, you can run a taco stand, you can run a bank, you can run a museum. And I didn't know anything about the inner workings of a museum in the sense of how they developed their collections and how they took care of things and what was important and what wasn't. And I love museums. And so I thought, well, this will be fun. And it has been. It's just been a great experience.
That's awesome. I think it sounds like an amazing facility. Why don't we talk about the facility a little bit? And I'm going to swing around to a couple things you just said there because I
Okay.
feel like there's a couple strings we need to pull on there. But why don't you
Okay.
tell us about the museum?
Well, the museum is the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. It was started in 1955. The governors of the 17 Western states got together and with Chester A. Reynolds and decided that they needed a museum to house what they were doing and the amazing things that were happening in the West. And at that time, they were thinking in terms of sort of the iconic cowboy, the Marlboro Man, if you will. And so they created what was then called the Cowboy Hall of Fame. And every year they honored cowboys, et cetera. It took them about 10 years to build this amazing facility. And it's an enormous facility. We have 220,000 square feet under roof. But when they got it open, John Wayne and Joel McCrae and just all these amazing cowboy stars, if you will, of the 60s came into town. They rode their horses from downtown up to we're located on Persimmon Hill and up here. And it was this just huge celebration. So for about 20 years, it was the Cowboy Hall of Fame. And then its mission was expanded to include Western heritage. And so what we try to do here is tell the stories of the West, how the West was built, how the West is maintained, and what it is that we're looking forward to as the West continues to be built.
That's absolutely fascinating. I mean, that's a huge undertaking. I mean, that's a very large history and a very large, geographic footprint. So that's absolutely incredible. What so you said 220,000 square feet of space. So what does it take to run something like that? I mean, you talked about your debits, credits, and people. What does it take to run something like that?
We've got about 100 employees, and about 40% of them are what I would call operations people: security, maintenance, housekeeping, that sort of thing. This is as are all museums. It's a 24/7 operation. You've got priceless artifacts and priceless art, and so someone has to be protecting them 24/7. And so a good percentage of our employees fall under that. But it takes curatorial, it takes development, folks that raise the money, it takes marketing, it takes education. We've got all of these departments, and then supporting departments like finance and events and things like that. So it's a very large operation. And it's a lot of fun because you have a lot of different people. You've got engineers and you've got cowboys. And sometimes they don't quite mix.
Absolutely. Most places I've worked, the engineers are the cowboys, but I think that takes on a whole different meaning when we talk about you.
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. So, when we were talking a little bit before the show, we discussed kind of hiring and retention and what that looks like in a unique business like yours. How's that going for you right now?
Well, I think that in our business, as in businesses all over the United States and perhaps even the world, finding talent and keeping talent is extraordinarily difficult. Certainly, we have what we read about in the paper, the Great Resignation, it is hard. Moreover, the cost of employees. I've had employees that came in at X figure, and I'll just give you an example. I have an employee that was very valuable to us. And I was probably paying him $70,000 a year. Today, I'm paying him $170,000. And that change has happened over a period of about 15 months. Now, that's unusual,
Right.
but the magnitude of the change isn't unusual here, particularly if you're going to find people that know what they're doing in a particular niche job.
So, when you're able to attract talent to your business, right? I'm assuming that it's different at different levels.
Sure.
But when you're attracting talent to your business, what kind of things are you doing to retain them once you finally get them through the door, right? I mean, obviously, wage adjustments is one thing you're staying current with, which, I mean, that's a massive increase. And if you play that down hourly and then grow that across your entire portfolio or your entire group of team, that's incredible. So, what kind of things are you doing to retain them once you get them there?
I think the salary is what gets people to look at the job, but it's not what gets people to take the job. And it absolutely, study after study will show you that it's not what it takes to keep an employee, particularly one that you've invested in and that you want to keep. You've got to create an environment where people want to work. Now, there was a period of time when the entire country was shut down and we all did what we call remote from home. We all worked from home. But that's not satisfying either for most people. We're social creatures. And so we need the ideas of others and the input of others to fulfill our own personal needs. So we allowed people to work from home during the pandemic. And then as the pandemic began to recede, or we found ways to protect ourselves, people began coming back to the workplace. I have a very young staff, and that means that a good number of them are new parents. In fact, 20% of my staff is a new parent. And so my offices are filled with very, very young children. We have mothers who are pumping. We have mothers that may only work 3 days a week, largely because of childcare issues. We have mothers who bring their children to work. Now, I can't have 4 and 5-year-olds running around a museum with priceless artifacts.
Right.
But when you've got an infant, first of all, it's just great fun having little kids in the office, and it makes it better for them as well.
I love that you've embraced that, because I think that it's always been an A or B conversation with remote or site-based, right?
Right. It's a
you're either
binary choice.
Yeah, right. There's no gray in between any of that. And I think that for you to be able to embrace that and be able to let people kind of bring their home to work a little bit. And I'm assuming, do you let people work from home at all? At any point in time?
Occasionally. But this is again a business of bringing the public inside our walls. And if we're going to do that, we kind of got to be here. But more importantly, ideas and thoughts, those germinate and grow in the presence of others. And so we made it work in the short term during the pandemic, but that's not the way that we best produce. That's not where our most creative spirits grow. And so you've got to have people here, but they are people. And that means that on the other side of that conversation, you have to understand that sometimes they can't solve a childcare issue, or they've got a parent who needs help, or whatever it is. You've got to be flexible and figure out a way to work with them. You put a lot of money and a lot of effort into growing them into the employee that you need for that role. Well, as an employer, I'd screw it up if I just said I'm going to be inflexible about it.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a really phenomenal position to take because, like we said, a lot of people are approaching this as a binary decision, right? You're either here or you're not. One of the things that you touched on, two really important things there that I think are good conversations that people are having right now. One of the conversations, is that in presence growth, right? When we're all together, there is growth and there's education and there's idea sharing to be had. And I think a lot of that took a back seat when people went remote, right? I mean, because they got really comfortable going remote. I mean, I'm remote for the first time in my career, and I can tell you right now, it's very different. So in your opinion, like, does it speed, or how fast does it make, all this change that you need to accomplish as a fixer? How quickly does that speed things when you all are together as a team versus, part of the team is remote, or some of the team is remote, or all of the team is remote, I guess, the case of the pandemic.
Yeah. It certainly speeds it up, but that's not what I'm really looking for. Although many people around me would deny that that's not what I'm looking for, because I do want it now. But what it really does is enrich the conversation. I get better and deeper and more thoughtful ideas. I get more refined ideas. I'm always surprised when you're as old as I am, you think that you've seen it all, and that whatever idea you have is germinated in this old brain, and it's got to be darn near perfect. And then I get in a room with my staff, and they take that idea and they tweak it, and dadgum if it's not better. Now I'm still going to claim credit for it, but not really. But it's a better idea. And then I'm kind of ashamed that I didn't think of it myself. So it's that enrichment that comes from being together that makes it more worthwhile.
I think that's phenomenal. And I think that's one of the things that as businesses who are site-based versus remote, or even hybrid or anything, I think that's one of the major benefits that is not talked about enough, because not only are you learning as a leader, right? You're smart enough to listen, but at the same time, everybody in that room is gaining something. And I think that's a huge selling point for being back in person. And, instead of being forced back to the office, there's a ton of benefit here. And this is one of the biggest ones, is that, you're all going to grow through the combined depth of conversation, and breadth of growth that you're bringing to it.
I think you're absolutely right.
That's awesome. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on that you mentioned a second ago was really kind of that thought of empathy, right? Where, you've got a 20% of your staff is younger, you've got different age groups, by and large spread out, it sounds like across the spectrum. And, that empathy has become really an in-demand benefit of jobs, right? To understand that life happens, things happen, and for the leaders to be able to understand that or have the empathy to be able to deal with that. How do you impart that empathy, or how do you work that empathy through your managers, through your team, to be able to get down to your team so that it's happening at every level?
It's Well, first of all, please understand that I get it wrong as often as I get it right.
I think we all do.
There's that. Um, but I think it starts with your staff. I think it start with your senior team, and I had a conversation with a relatively young member of my senior staff, and they were being a little perhaps more dogmatic about something than they had to be. And we just talked about it in terms of grace. You in order to get grace as a manager, you've got to give grace. And so hopefully I'm leading by example. Hopefully they're concentrating only on the times I got it right and not on the times I got it wrong, or that I was too hard-nosed about something. And I certainly can be. But hopefully they saw it in action. They didn't just read about it or hear about it. They actually saw it.
I love that. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm writing down a ton here. This has been a great conversation. So thank you very much for sharing. This is great. When you and I were talking, prior to this conversation, one of the things that we touched on, and you brought it up in the beginning of the show, was, the idea of the fact that you're a fixer, right? You fix things, and that's you've self-identified, and that's your niche. When you went through that with me, we kind of identified I'm learning to be a sustainer, and it's something that I'm finding a little bit of proclivity with here. Where do you see those categories, and how do you find yourself in one of them?
Well, I have this philosophy, and I believe there are three kinds of successful leaders. There are entrepreneurs. There are those that sustain whatever an entrepreneur has created, and then there are fixers. There are those that come in and fix a mess that perhaps a less successful leader has made, and hopefully bring it up to a place where an amazing sustainer can take it and fine tune it. I don't happen to be one of those people. I have very little patience, and a very short attention span. And so I've got to kind of keep moving and find that next challenge. So I kind of get this feeling. Usually it takes me usually about 4 years to get things kind of in the right spot, get the financial situation fixed, get whatever else has gone wrong. And then I sort of start thinking it's probably time for somebody that really has a different skill set to come in. And so at the end of 4 years, I gave notice, and I will leave here soon. And this amazing person is going to take over from me, and they're just going to fine tune this place, and it's going to sing. I know, after he gets in here and really can fine tune the more gross changes that I've been able to make here.
That's phenomenal. So identifying yourself as kind of that fixer, position, how has that impacted your career just in general? Kind of set your direction?
I think, as we talked about, I have 6 children, and one of my children is a special needs child. And she describes it as thus: my mother can't keep a job. Because I change jobs about every 4 to 5 years. And so she thinks that that something is going wrong, when I like to think of it as something is going right.
That is phenomenal and hilarious because I can't, I think I shared with you before that my kids see 2 books and they tell everybody I'm an author, even though it's like,
Well, you are.
well, yeah, but it's like a 0.5% of a snapshot of a year of my life, right? Like
Yeah.
it's, so
Yeah.
it is all perception, but I love these categories. I mean, whether you're a builder, a sustainer, or a fixer, you very much by being self-aware can build a career, create a career, sustain a career, whatever that looks like, within these categories. And you're probably much more robust as a leader. And even outside of work, understanding what you're good at and kind of leaning into that versus maybe trying to always be something you're not within some of these categories.
Yeah, there's just no way. I just don't have the mental capacity to pretend to be something I'm not. And more importantly, I don't have the desire to pretend. And that might sound like I'm being very self-aware and that sort of thing. Nah, I'm just bored. It's just and I make mistakes and I'm just not a good leader when I'm bored. And so it's really easy for me to know when that time has come.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, as we kind of talk about, what's next and, identifying your strengths and things like that, obviously you're bringing in new leaders all the time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What kind of advice are you giving them when they come to your facility?
Don't screw it up. No.
Yeah. Best advice you can give somebody.
Right. And it's just so easy to follow. Oh yeah, I wish I'd thought of that. No, what I tell them is listen. Listen to what your staff needs. Now, I will tell you that when I first came here, I did what I always do, which is to go around and talk to various staff members, etc. And this was a very staid sort of institution, and it had calcified, in certain areas. And 201, they said things need to change. And then they proceeded to tell me how I should change their neighbor, not themselves. So I knew that this was going to take a little bit longer to do, but folks have embraced, or they've moved on because it just wasn't the right place for them. So you just kind of as a leader, you've got to always be paying attention to where your staff is, and refine that, because in the business that you're in the business that I'm in, staff is everything. They're the ones who make it work. You're just the ringmaster. You don't get to ride the pony or swing from the trapeze or tame the tigers. You just are the one who calls the shot. And so you got to pay attention to them and make sure that you're hearing what they're saying. That doesn't mean you're always doing it, because if it doesn't fit in with that larger vision, then we've got to make some adjustments. But you don't want to get too far down the road with someone from a trapeze who's afraid of heights.
We have that conversation all the time. The right person in the right seat on the right bus, right?
Yep, that's right. That's
awesome.
Exactly right.
Awesome. Well, that is phenomenal advice. I should have expected nothing less. Natalie, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I really appreciate it. If people want to find out more, about the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, where are they going to?
Well, hopefully they're going to go to our amazing website, the nationalcowboymuseum.org. We have this amazing marketing and education departments. These two departments work together hand in hand to bring the best of the West online, and they'll find whatever they need. And if not, just pick up the phone and call because somebody's going to help you.
That is awesome. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for your time today. And hopefully we can do this again in the future.
I'd love that. I'd love
All
that.
right.
Next
soon,
career
then.
though, right?
Absolutely. The next time
Okay.
around, we'll go with the new business. This will be great. I love
Okay.
it.
And perhaps you'll have your third book.
Maybe I will. Who knows? My kids have to have something to talk about, right?
Indeed.
All right.
Thank you
Talk
so
soon,
much.
Natalie. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.